Hi, I'm Douglas Keong, and I'm an ADE class of 2007. And I'm here to talk to you about our app development with Swift, Build Something That Matters curriculum. And in this introduction, I'm going to walk you through some of the considerations that we thought about when we designed the course. And then later we'll talk about how to do some of the hands-on portions of the activity. And we're hoping that a lot of you will find great ways to use this with audiences to really show them how code can be used to build things and engage lots of different students in working with Xcode and Swift. So if you start out with the introduction, so the introduction primarily, what you'll have is we're going to talk about code and primarily the idea that code is used to build things that you want to see in the world, to build cool things, to take your creations and bring them to life. And, traditionally, I think we've covered a lot of teaching code through basically learning different languages. So people often concentrate on, what's the best language to learn, or what's the merits of this language versus that language. But we're taking a different approach, and we're saying, look, what is it that you want to build? What's the problem you want to solve? Or what's the issue that you want to share, bring to light? How is code going to help you do that? And we find that if you start with context, in other words, what is it that you're trying to do? And then you use a really elegant, simple language like Swift and use it to actually build apps that are beautiful and that work on all devices and that people can use in real contexts. What we find is that that actually engages larger numbers of students. In our school, we get more girls taking the course, we get more boys taking the course who would normally not see themselves as coders or programmers. Our goal is to get more artists and writers and designers and even students who don't necessarily see themselves as computer science majors. We think everybody should have sort of a basic level of coding literacy, and we believe that starting Swift playgrounds and then working into the playgrounds in Xcode and working with Swift is a great way to do that. So I think the way that we present this workshop is really to say it's not so much about the language, it's about solving real problems and helping people. And that's where Swift comes in handy. So, usually we'll bring in some screenshots from the actual curriculum and show people that Apple does have a comprehensive K through 12 curriculum. It's free, and that it starts out at the elementary levels and goes right through Swift playgrounds in the middle school and then right up onto Xcode and Swift in the high school. We usually then present a number of examples, and if you have examples that you've got students who have created apps, or if you know about students locally who have created apps, that is a wonderful thing to do. Bring those in, talk about those stories. But again, the theme in this section is really talking about using code as a way of building something that's important. And, as a matter of fact, I think one way into teaching coding is to start kids thinking about design. What is it that makes an app beautiful? What is it that makes it intuitive, easy to use? And for that, we point them to Apple's Human Interface Guidelines. That's a great way to, as an intro to thinking about coding and thinking about what can we use to build. There are certain apps that are easier to use than others, and Apple's done a wonderful job of pulling all of these together and putting them into the Human Interface Guidelines. I think it's riveting reading, and it doesn't involve any code at all. It's a great way to start people thinking about apps. So again, talking about some of the code examples. So often, one way to start with project-based learning is to give kids a challenge. Challenge-based learning starts with a challenge. A lot of design thinking starts with a challenge to design for a particular constituency or a particular group of individuals. And so as an example, one example might be build bridges in between individuals. And so here are some examples of apps that have done just that. So in one school, we had a student work with a parent of an autistic child, and she had found out a way to have children with autism teach them how to count, and she had no way to get the word out. And so this student had done app development with Swift and kind of worked with her and created an iPad app, and the iPad app helps through sort of colored flashcards, helps children with autism learn to count, and it's become a really popular app on the App Store for children on all ends of the autism spectrum. And what's really neat about that story is, this is a case where the parent had this wonderful thing that she wanted to get out, but she had no way to share that. And this student, when he started, really didn't know anything about autism. And now they each know a whole lot more. And so putting the emphasis on the idea that coding can often lead to a really fruitful collaboration and a nice working relationship between our students and other people in the community. I think that's a wonderful message. This is an example of a student who created an app that allows children who are learning English as a second language to have spoken vocabulary words, so that they click on the word, they tap on the word, and then it pronounces it and says what the English term is. And it's a way for teachers to get some insight into what kinds of vocabulary those students recognize. And it allows, it fosters communication between teachers and ESL students. So, and this was a completely student-driven idea. So it's very empowering to tell kids that if you see something, if you see a problem, if you see a need, you can use code to fill that need. This is a story that's received some national attention. So this was a 16-year-old girl, and so she created an app called Sit With Us because she had been bullied in the lunchroom. And so she created an app that allows you to if you have a friendly lunch table and you don't mind having people come sit with you, you can sort of put it up on this social app and say, hey, you're free to come sit with us. And so this was a really neat way for her to solve a problem that she saw in her own school community with being bullied. So these are just some really neat examples of things that kids can design and build. And the design aspect of it, starting with design, is a really good entry point to thinking about coding, because by the time kids design and prototype something, they care about it and they feel like it matters. And that's what gives kids the motivation to persist through learning the code, because, learning code is difficult. It involves getting stuck a lot. You'll get stuck, then you'll get unstuck, then you get frustrated by something else, and then you do your research and you figure out how to solve it. And that's the progress of learning to code. It's really a series of problems that you're solving. We like to kind of frame it in the design cycle. And the Apple curriculum has a really great intro on the design cycle, talking about brainstorming, going through planning, prototyping, and iteration. So I think it's often good to mention that, because it also, in a lot of schools right now, they're looking at project-based learning and design thinking, and this is a nice way to kind of mesh in with kind of those initiatives. So sometimes if schools are looking for, where does this curriculum fit in? Or if you're looking to build more interdisciplinary ties between the computer science courses and the rest of the school, I think the design cycle is one way where you can do that. And what it looks like in code is really a planning, and then going to prototyping, and then ultimately to testing and evaluating on real devices. And even before they actually get to coding it, what they can start to do is put prototype images up on in Keynote. You can mock it up in Keynote, and then you can run it on your phone.
Hello there, I'm Mike Yakubowski. I'm an ADE from the class of 2017, and I'm going to be talking about the unplugged part of the workshop. And before we get started, we want to get into the learning objectives at this point. We've set the stage for why we're doing this, but now we need to talk about what they're going to learn, what they're going to get out of the rest of the workshop, and really get into why we're doing it in this format. So we've got the objectives here. We want to get students engaged in coding. We want to experience some programming activities. We want them to experience Swift. We also want them to experience Xcode. It can be a little intimidating, and we want them to feel a little more at ease with it. And then we also especially want them to see Apple's high school coding curriculum. We want them to see the Intro to App Dev and app development with Swift. We want them to see that these are incorporated in there. These activities that we're doing are part of the curriculum that's in there. They can pick it up and do this, and they don't have to go in and write all new curriculum if they're not ready to, or they don't want to. They've got something to get started with. So we're going to get into the first activity, and we're going to begin with a challenge, and we're going to keep with that theme of designing something that matters. And so the challenge that we're going to give them is to design an app that helps a new student at school. And then we want to start with some guiding questions. We want to start with some of the things that they need to be thinking about, that they need to be doing while they're when they get started, they need to what's going to frame the problem for them. We've got some examples here for them to think about and to get them started, prime the pump and let them know, because we don't want to take too long thinking through the questions. Students obviously would take a little bit longer. And then want to get into some what kind of guiding activities would be built from these questions that you could go in and do some research, do some investigations to find out what kind of app and what kind of solutions would work for this problem of an app for students who are new to your school. And we have some examples here about reaching out to other schools, looking at research, interviewing a current student. All of these, though, drive to that bottom corner of create and test a prototype. With the others, you gain the information you need. You get the insights that you need to be able to develop a good, informed prototype. And that's really the key here, is that informed prototype. We're going to give them in groups of 3 to 5, and their goal is to come up with an app idea. They're going to spend about 5 minutes or so, depending on how much time you have, to come up with an idea of an app. We want them to really brainstorm. We want them to really go wild, come up with a lot of ideas, build on each other's ideas, and see that group process. And then we'll bring them back together, and we're going to talk about a little bit about the human interface guidelines. That Apple has put these together. We're going to want to explain to them that these help you develop a really good app that looks well, that it works well, that the user is comfortable when they get in there and they start using it. They don't have to be trained on where everything is. They already know. And that's a lot of what the human interface guidelines does. It makes it so that your app is user-friendly and that it makes it more likely to be successful and to be used. And if we're trying to build something that matters, then the users need to be able to get into it quickly. And that's really important. These are some examples of your table views where people know that they can touch on if they tap anywhere on there on any of the lines, that it'll take them to more information. They also know that up in the top left corner, that's how you get back to where you came from, so you can navigate forwards and backwards through these. And you just know that, and those are familiar concepts. And then we've got collections here. And again, it's very familiar. The users know that if they tap on any one of the images, it takes them to that content. They know the tab bars at the bottom that go to different areas of the app for different features or different things that they can access and do. And these are all very familiar to them. And so we want to make use of those things that are very familiar. And that's what the Human Interface Guidelines helps you do, is to understand those things that keep it familiar, that keep it well designed, and keep it very useful. And if we turn back and we go to the teacher guide, there's actually in the prototyping page, in one of the lessons, talks about the prototyping, gives them prompts for the students that comes from the Human Interface Guidelines. And we want to let everybody in the audience know and make sure they understand that this is out of the guides that Apple has given them, that they don't have to come up with this. They don't have to remember the Human Interface Guidelines, because the curriculum materials bring it up. They talk about it often. They give you the links to it so that you don't have to make any of this up. It's right there for you, and it's at your fingertips, even with prompts for the students on when they're going in and prototyping, and things to think about, like what does the first screen of the user sees, which buttons are visible, and how many taps does it take to find what they need to know? Those types of things, those good questions to ask as you're developing your prototype. And those are all in the guides. So now it's time to go in, and let's go in and start prototyping. So everybody's going to be on their own. They've got the sheet that is going to give them 3 screens, and we're going to start with just 3 views. And we're limited on time, so we want to make sure that we do something useful, do something well. And 3 is a great place to start. Even in class, it's good to start because it keeps the students from getting too involved and trying to put too much in. They'll try to throw everything in, including the kitchen sink. But when they got 3 screens, they get to the heart of it, and they really do design well when they're limited that way. Now, this is an example of what the final product would be. This is another student who had done this, and this is what their screens looked like. And we're going to let everybody go, give them about 10 to 15 minutes, and remind them, ask some questions. How are you going to get to the next screen? How are you going to get back? Are there any dead ends? What information are you going to see on there? How do you know which buttons to press to go do what? And those things are all those important questions to ask and remind them as they're developing it and designing it. And then, if time permitting, let a couple of them share what their ideas were, what the screens that they came up with and what they look like, and talk about it for a minute. And then we're going to get into the plugged in activity next and get into Xcode.
Right. I want to talk a little bit about phase 3 of the workshop that we're designing. So in phase 3, the participants in the workshop are going to prototype their ideas from phase 1 and phase 2 of the workshop. So in this, what the students are going to do is they are going to take a sketch template, as you see here, that's provided, and be able to start planning out their app. We would want the students to design whatever app that they were choosing to design in the design phases. And what they're going to do is they're just going to take an iPad or an iPhone and they're going to take pictures of these devices once they've sketched out what each one of the storyboards that they want to look like. Once they design those and they take pictures of them, they can upload them onto your computer using AirDrop is easiest. Then you open up each of the pictures, and if you want to crop it to something nice, I would just take preview, highlight the area that you want, do an edit, copy, and do a file new from clipboard, and you can edit it to exactly the same size and shape that you would want each of the pictures to be. So you don't have to worry about when you take the picture getting it exactly in the frame. That can always be done on the computer. Now once you have each of the pieces, you don't have to do it with Xcode, but I'm going to show you with Xcode because it's going to tie the best thing together of Xcode and the prototype that you have. You can do it in any of the other Apple products. You can do it in Keynote. You can do it in many different ways. You can actually just have the students sketched out and present them on this pieces of paper. But to be really powerful and to show the coding possibilities, you're going to want to show it on a device, and the best way to do that is through Xcode. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys what the idea here is. So if you look at where to be, this is an app that students created when given the idea of how could you help a student that's brand new to a school. And they came up with the idea of where to be, where the app allows you to enter in here the classes that you have and what times you have. And then once you have all of that entered, at any time during this course of the day, you hit the where to be, and it gives you a map of where you're supposed to be at that moment. You have the big pulsating blue dot of where the student is at the current time, and then some sort of destination. But you can see here that through rapid prototyping, they can demonstrate their ideas and be workable in exactly what they would want to do for their app. And it's a really non-invasive way of being able to show someone exactly what you want and not have to worry about all the different parts of coding at the first phase. You're just doing the little dip your toe in and to try to understand what's going on. So to do this, you're going to start an Xcode project, and we're just going to call it where to be. We'll save it to the desktop here. Okay. So the first thing that I would have the students do is I would have the students come to the XC assets here and grab those images that they had from before and copy those in. So once they have all the images, they then don't have to worry about doing that again. All the images that they've got for each of the storyboards is already there. So next, you're going to come to the main storyboard, and you're going to talk through with the students a little bit of ideas of the main storyboard and what that part is. You can see here I would have the students then do a new view controller for each of the views, each of the pictures that they have. All of this is discussed inside of the facilitator's guide, which is one of the things that we've talked about. You can see here it helps you through what the facilitator should do and some of the things to discuss, what you should demonstrate with preview, demonstrate opening Xcode, all the things that I'm demonstrating with you guys right now, just so that you can kind of visually see what's going on. Okay, so as I minimize that, I would open up the view controller and I would grab all the view controllers that you have. In mine here that I'm demonstrating, there's 4 view controllers. So we're going to create each one of these to be a view controller on the storyboard. I'm grabbing these out of the object library that you guys see here. If you don't have experience with Xcode, the object library allows you to grab all the different objects, buttons and labels and things onto the storyboard. You can show it both as a filtered view, depending on if you want the icons to be able to see each of the things. If I click on something, it tells me what each of the things is. Okay, so after you've had everybody create the view controllers, you can do this in a couple different ways. You could do it where you demonstrate it to the students, and then the students then would have to stop while you're watching you, and then you give them time, or they could kind of follow along. That is completely up to you. There's also ways that you could show a video. You could write instructions, a set of instructions, and just kind of have people work at their own pace. That's completely up to the facilitator of the workshop. So next, we would take an image view, and on each one of those storyboards, take an image view, dragging it onto each of the storyboards. It's the fastest way to be able to prototype. As you're doing this with the students and talking them through it, you could talk about what the image view is, what each one of the images. Okay. So now that you've got each one of the image views on there, you're going to select the image view, and over here in the attributes inspector, you can see that if I choose the attributes inspector, I can pick which image I want in each one of those. And very, very quickly you can prototype exactly what the students are desiring to make. So here I'll show image 2, and here image 3, and then image 4. And so they can demonstrate to somebody exactly what you're looking for. Finally, last thing you're going to want to do down here in the search bar is we'll look for a button. And you can create a button on each of the pages. So I'm going to put a button here that's going to transition to the next page. Holding down Control as I drag to the next view controller here, that allows me to do what's called a segue, allowing me to transition between the 2 pages. If I want a back button, I drag a new button here. Since I've already got back on this view controller, what I would do is I would just get rid of the title on the button, and you can see that now you can resize it. So just tapping up in the top here on the back is going to allow you to go back to the view controller. Holding down Control and view controller, back to the next one. Same thing, I would just grab a button to each view controller. I would remove the text, and then I would Control, click, and drag to this one to the show segue. To go back, I would grab a new button, get rid of that, and drag that segue to come back. Final for this one, we're going to make it very large over everything here. Control, click, and dragging. Last button. And so I'm going to run this on the iPhone X simulator. As I run here, you guys can see how quickly and easily that a student can see and get exposed to Xcode to see how the prototyping is supposed to be done. You get a little bit of the storyboard. You don't have to worry too much about the coding. As many people see that the coding is difficult for some people when they first understand what's going on. But the design phase is the key, where everyone can feel like they can design. As I run on the simulator here, you can see that now everything transitions between each one of the pages that I want to go to. I click my button, I can see it go to the next page, and I can go back. And so I just get a really, really neat way of exposing someone to Xcode, exposing somebody to the design process, and all the different phases that it's part of. You're exposing somebody to the preview, you're exposing them to Xcode, and like we said, all of this is in the facilitator's guide. So that's phase 3 of the workshop. After that, what I would recommend doing is I would recommend having the students present their apps to everyone, and you can go through the critique process. So thanks.